Welcome, Maggie. Today we're diving into a crucial topic, decoding deceptive teachings, and more specifically, how to discern them. Understanding how to identify misleading doctrines is incredibly important, especially those that might subtly deny God's transformative power or encourage spiritual passivity.
Thank you, Elliot. I'm really looking forward to this session. It feels more vital than ever to grasp these concepts, and I'm eager to learn how to better recognize and navigate these challenges effectively.
Excellent. We'll start by examining the very language of deception itself, then move on to understanding the role of genuine grace and faith as our counterpoint, ultimately aiming to cultivate true discernment and spiritual vigilance. All right, Maggie, let's begin our deep dive into the language of deception. Fundamentally, deception involves misleading others by intentionally distorting the truth. Its primary goal is to control an individual's thinking, guiding them toward conclusions that serve the deceiver's specific intent.
So, the core mechanism is truth distortion, and the ultimate aim is thought control. What drives this distortion? Is it always a conscious act?
That's an excellent question. While often conscious, deception can also originate from a prideful heart, where the deceiver might not fully grasp the extent of the consequences. The intent, however, remains to manipulate perception to align with a predetermined outcome.
Understood. So deception is about twisting truth to steer someone's thoughts, sometimes even from a place of unacknowledged pride, to achieve a specific agenda.
Precisely. Now, let's examine the characteristics of deceptive language itself. A common trait is the inclusion of partial truths. These are statements that contain elements of truth, but are incomplete or presented out of context, making them misleading.
How do these partial truths typically manifest? Are they subtle omissions or more overt misrepresentations?
They are often subtle omissions or selective presentations of facts. They might profess knowledge or adherence to doctrine while subtly altering its core meaning. This creates an illusion of credibility, making the distortion harder to detect.
I see. So it's about mixing enough truth to make the falsehood palatable. What about the concept of grace in deceptive teachings?
Deceptive language frequently promises grace while simultaneously allowing sin to persist. It alters the perception of grace, suggesting that continuous sinning is compatible with God's grace, rather than grace being a power for transformation away from sin.
So it redefines grace to accommodate sin, rather than empowering freedom from it. This sounds like it could lead to a dangerous complacency.
Indeed, deceptive teachings often promise liberty from sin while denying its consequences. This can lead to spiritual passivity, where individuals feel no urgent need to actively resist or overcome sin because they believe grace covers it regardless.
So, spiritual passivity means a lack of active engagement in personal sanctification, believing that grace negates the need for it. This seems to contradict the very purpose of grace.
It does. This brings us to the appeal and inherent danger of such language. Deceptive language is often appealing because it offers pleasure or perceived advantage without consequence. It caters to a desire for ease and avoids accountability.
Why is this particular appeal so effective in drawing people in?
It's effective because it aligns with human nature's inclination towards comfort and self-justification. It encourages a lifestyle of sin under the guise of grace, creating a false sense of security and promoting continuous sinning without fear of condemnation.
How does this directly contradict the teachings of Christ?
Christ's teachings emphasize genuine repentance, transformation, and denying ungodliness to live righteously. Deceptive language, by contrast, normalizes sin, presenting it as sustainable under grace, which fundamentally dismisses the transformative power of God's grace.
So, deceptive language uses partial truths and a distorted view of grace to make sin seem acceptable, leading to spiritual passivity and a false sense of security, ultimately contradicting the call to transformation.
That is an accurate summary. The consequence is a doctrine that leaves individuals in bondage to sin, believing they are free, while denying the true deliverance offered through genuine faith and obedience.
What is the practical outcome for someone who adheres to these deceptive teachings?
They remain spiritually stagnant, unable to experience the full power of God's grace to overcome sin. They may project false humility or excessive sinfulness, masking pride, and inadvertently lead others astray by their example and teaching.
So, identifying deceptive language involves recognizing partial truths, distorted grace that permits sin, and promises of liberty without consequences, all of which lead to spiritual stagnation and a denial of true transformation.
Precisely. Recognizing these patterns in language is the first critical step in discerning and countering misleading doctrines effectively. We have thoroughly examined the characteristics of deceptive language. Now, let us transition to the counterpoint, understanding the role of genuine grace and faith in discerning truth.
How does genuine grace fundamentally differ from the distorted version we discussed earlier, which seemed to accommodate sin?
Genuine grace through faith leads to salvation and transformation. It teaches us to deny ungodliness and live righteously, as highlighted in Titus 2:11-13. This is an active process.
So it's about active transformation and a change in lifestyle, not merely a covering for continued sin.
Precisely. True grace empowers believers to overcome temptation and live a life free from the dominion of sin. Romans 6:11 and 16:17 clearly illustrate this power for deliverance.
This means genuine grace provides the power to change, rather than an excuse to remain unchanged or spiritually passive.
That is correct. It is a dynamic force for sanctification. Now, let us consider the integral role of faith in this process.
What is the connection between faith, obedience, and receiving this transformative grace?
Genuine faith is inherently obedient to God. Through this obedient faith, we receive grace. Hebrews 5:8-9 states that Christ became the source of eternal salvation for those who obey him.
So faith isn't passive. It's an active obedience that unlocks and applies grace for transformation.
Exactly. Faith is demonstrated through obedience, and it is through this active faith that we experience the full power of grace, leading to eternal salvation.
Understood. So genuine grace transforms and genuine faith is obedient. How do we use this understanding to identify and counter deceptive doctrines?
Recognizing deceptive language involves identifying partial truths and promises of liberty without consequences. These stand in stark contrast to the demands of genuine grace and faith.
So if a teaching doesn't encourage denying ungodliness and living righteously, it's likely deceptive, regardless of how it frames grace.
Indeed, deceptive teachings deny the power of God's grace to deliver from sin, promoting a powerless grace that leaves one in bondage. Genuine grace delivers from that bondage.
This means we should look for teachings that empower us to overcome sin rather than justifying it.
Precisely. The language of deception must be uncovered to prevent spiritual destruction and maintain alignment with the true teachings of Christ.
What is the practical application for believers encountering these doctrines?
Believers are encouraged to remain steadfast in faith, not shifting from the hope of the gospel. Furthermore, we are called to purify ourselves as Jesus is pure, as stated in Colossians 1:23-24 and 1 John 3:3-4.
Therefore, genuine grace and faith are characterized by active transformation, obedience, and a call to purity, directly countering the spiritual passivity and sin justification of deceptive teachings.
An excellent and comprehensive summary, Maggie. This discernment is crucial for maintaining spiritual integrity and experiencing true freedom. All right, Maggie, to wrap up, we've established that deceptive teachings use partial truths and a distorted view of grace to promote spiritual passivity, while genuine grace and faith demand active transformation and obedience. For an exam, remember to contrast these core characteristics. Look for whether a teaching empowers you to overcome sin or merely justifies it. Pay close attention to the language around grace and liberty.
That makes perfect sense, Elliot. The distinction between grace that transforms and grace that accommodates sin is really clear now. I'll definitely review the specific examples we discussed, especially how partial truths are woven in, and focus on the active nature of genuine faith and obedience.
Excellent. Your understanding is key. Next session, we'll move into practical strategies for applying this discernment in everyday life and addressing specific challenges that arise when confronting these deceptive teachings within communities.